Hello, survivors. Do you want to be part of the next stories? Comment below your name and the situation you would like to be in. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's begin. The taste of copper flooded my mouth before anything else made sense. Then the world came rushing back in fragments. Upside-down dashboard lights, the acrid smell of burning rubber, and something wet dripping onto my forehead. My wrists burned where the shackles had twisted during the impact, cutting into flesh already raw from weeks of processing. That's when I heard it. A wet, rhythmic sound, like someone eating soup, but wrong, all wrong. The transport van had flipped completely. Through the spider-webbed windshield, I could see asphalt where sky should be. My legs were tangled in the chain that connected my ankle shackles to the floor bolt, and every breath sent sharp pain through my ribs. "Mick?" I called out, my voice hoarse. Agent Mick Rodriguez had been sitting across from me, clipboard in hand, reviewing my transfer papers for the third time. Professional, thorough, the kind of federal agent who dotted every I and crossed every T. The wet sound continued. I twisted my neck, chains rattling, and saw him, or what was left of him. Agent Rodriguez was pinned beneath a section of twisted metal, his crisp white shirt now a canvas of dark stains. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Agent Lisa Kane, his partner of 6 years, crouched over him like a starved animal. Her blonde hair, which had been pulled back in a regulation bun, now hung in blood-matted strands around her face. She had torn into Bill's throat with her teeth, and the sound I'd been hearing was her feeding. Her feeding on a man who'd probably shared coffee with her that morning. "Kane," I shouted. She looked up. Her eyes, God, her eyes were wrong. Clouded over like cataracts, but still moving, still tracking. Blood dripped from her mouth as she tilted her head, studying me with the interest of a predator sizing up prey. This wasn't some elaborate rescue attempt by my old crew. Tommy, Big Eddie, and the rest of my bank-robbing days were long gone, either dead or serving their own time. This was something else entirely. Agent Kane started crawling toward me, dragging her legs behind her. I could see bone protruding from her left shin, but she moved without any sign of pain. I yanked at the chain connecting my ankles to the floor mount, panic flooding my system with the kind of clarity that had kept me alive through 12 years of armed robberies. The bolt was loose, damaged in the crash. I pulled harder, feeling it give way with each jerk. Kane reached the twisted metal barrier that separated us and began trying to squeeze through, her broken body contorting. Her fingers, nails torn and bloody, clawed at the air inches from my face. 3 more yanks and the bolt came free. I scrambled backward, dragging myself toward the rear of the overturned van. Kane followed, leaving a trail of dark fluid behind her. The back doors had buckled but hadn't sealed completely. I could see daylight through a gap near the top. Using the chain between my wrists as leverage, I pulled myself up and forced my shoulder against the damaged door. It gave way with a screech of protesting metal. I tumbled out onto wet grass, autumn air filling my lungs. The Oklahoma countryside stretched around me, rolling hills dotted with cattle and farmhouses. Interstate 35 ran like a scar through the landscape, and our overturned transport van sat in the drainage ditch beside it. More sounds of feeding came from inside the van. I hobbled away, chains limiting my stride to short steps. My orange prison jumpsuit was torn at the knee, and I could feel blood soaking through the fabric. But I was alive, free in the most technical sense of the word. The crash site told a story. Our van had rear-ended a family sedan that had stopped in the middle of the highway. The sedan's driver was slumped over the wheel, unmoving. A child's car seat sat empty in the back, its straps cut. That's when I saw the other vehicles. A semi-truck had jackknifed across 2 lanes, its trailer blocking traffic in both directions. Cars were scattered at odd angles, some with their doors hanging open, others with spider-webbed windshields painted red from the inside. Bodies lay scattered across the asphalt, but some of them were moving. A man wandered between the stopped cars. His briefcase was still clutched in one hand, but the other hung at an odd angle, clearly broken. His face was pale, almost gray, and dark veins spiderwebbed across his visible skin. He noticed me and changed direction. I backed toward the damaged sedan, looking for anything that could serve as a weapon. The driver's door was open. Inside, I found what I needed, a Glock 17 in a shoulder holster beneath the dead man's jacket. FBI, according to his badge. Agent Peterson. The businessman in the suit was 20 feet away now, moving faster than seemed possible for someone with obvious injuries. I raised the Glock, muscle memory from my criminal days taking over. "Stop right there," I commanded. He didn't stop, didn't even acknowledge that I'd spoken, just kept coming, his broken arm swinging limply at his side. I put 2 rounds center mass. The impact staggered him but didn't drop him. He kept walking forward, dark fluid oozing from the bullet holes in his white shirt. My 3rd shot took off the top of his skull. He collapsed. I stood there, smoking Glock in my hands, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. In 12 years of bank jobs, I'd never killed anyone. Wounded, yes. Threatened, absolutely. But never killed. And this thing, this infected person, had taken a direct hit to the chest and kept moving. A car horn blared somewhere behind me, followed by screaming. I turned to see more figures emerging from the crashed vehicles. A woman in a blood-stained nurse's uniform. 2 teenage boys still wearing their high school Letterman jackets. An elderly man dragging one leg behind him. I searched Agent Peterson's body quickly, finding an extra magazine and a tactical knife. His radio was shattered, but his car keys were intact. The sedan was dented but might still run. The infected were spreading out across the highway, some drawn to sounds of survivors trapped in their vehicles, others simply wandering aimlessly until something caught their attention. I had maybe 60 seconds before they noticed me again. I tried the sedan's ignition. The engine turned over but died immediately. Flooded. "Come on," I muttered, trying again. This time it caught, settling into a rough idle. A face slammed against the passenger window. One of the teenage boys, his varsity jacket torn and stained. His eyes were the same clouded white I'd seen in Agent Kane, but they tracked my movement through the glass. He clawed at the window, his fingernails leaving bloody streaks. I threw the car in reverse, tires spinning on loose gravel, and backed away from the crash site. The infected boy stumbled after the car for a few steps, then lost interest and wandered toward a pickup truck where someone was screaming for help. 3 miles down the highway, I found a truck stop. The parking lot was chaos, overturned vehicles, scattered cargo, and bodies everywhere. But I could also see survivors, real ones. A group of truckers had barricaded themselves inside the main building, firing through broken windows at the figures shambling between the diesel pumps. I parked behind the overturned motorhome and listened to the radio, hoping for some kind of official explanation. Centers for Disease Control has confirmed outbreaks in 17 states, a shaky voice reported. Initial symptoms include high fever, aggressive behavior, and loss of cognitive function. If you encounter individuals displaying these symptoms, do not attempt to reason with them. Maintain distance and contact authorities immediately. The broadcast cut to static, then resumed with a different voice. This is emergency alert system. Seek immediate shelter. Avoid populated areas. Military units have been deployed to major metropolitan areas. I switched channels, finding fragments of terrified voices. They bit through my neighbor's throat. Tried to shoot one, but it just kept coming. Don't think they're really dead, they're just... Static consumed the signal. A new voice broke through, clearer than the others. This is Colonel Johnson broadcasting from Fort Sill. If anyone can hear this, we're establishing a safe zone at coordinates. The transmission dissolved into electronic squealing. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Orange jumpsuit, shackles still locked around my wrists and ankles. 3-day stubble and a face that had appeared on wanted posters across 6 states. Frank Webb, age 34, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon. Suspected in 14 bank heists between Dallas and Denver. 6 hours ago, I'd been public enemy number 1 in this part of Oklahoma. Now I was just another survivor in a world that had apparently decided to eat itself alive. The screaming from the truck stop was getting louder. Through the diesel fumes and autumn haze, I could see the truckers inside the building firing their hunting rifles at targets that wouldn't stay down. But then I heard something else. A voice. faint but desperate, coming from the direction of our overturned transport van. "Help! Somebody help me!" I'd been so focused on escaping I hadn't checked if anyone else was alive in there. The driver? What was his name? Morrison. He'd been unconscious when I crawled out, pinned behind the wheel. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, engine idling, listening to that voice carry across the highway. Every instinct told me to drive away, keep moving, survive. But that voice kept calling. I put the sedan in drive and headed back toward the crash site. Morrison was trapped behind the crumpled steering column, conscious but bleeding heavily from a head wound. The infected Agent Kane was still in the back, clawing at the twisted metal that had kept her from reaching me earlier. "Thank God," Morrison gasped when he saw me approach the driver's side window. I thought everyone was dead. I could see the problem immediately. The steering column had crushed his legs, and hydraulic fluid from the power steering was leaking onto the hot engine block. One spark and the whole van would go up. "Can you move your legs?" I asked. He tried, then shook his head. "I can't feel anything below my waist." Behind him, Agent Kane had found a gap in the metal barrier and was squeezing through, her broken body contorting at impossible angles. She'd be free in minutes. "We need to get you out of there," I said. But even as I spoke, I could see it was hopeless. The jaws of life couldn't have freed him, and all I had was a tactical knife. Morrison saw it too. "The keys," he said, nodding toward his belt. "Radio the coordinates to Fort Sill, tell them about the outbreak." Kane's head emerged through the gap, followed by her shoulders. Dark fluid dripped from her mouth as she focused on Morrison's movement. "There's no time," I said. "Please." Morrison's voice cracked. "I've got a daughter in Tulsa. Someone needs to warn people." I reached through the window and grabbed his radio, clipping it to my jumpsuit. Behind him, Kane freed one arm and reached toward his neck. "Look at me," I told Morrison. "What's your daughter's name?" "Emma. She's 8. She likes horses and—" Agent Kane's teeth sank into the side of his throat. Morrison's scream cut off in a wet gurgle. I raised the Glock, but Kane's head was too close to his. One missed shot and I'd hit them both. By the time Kane pulled away, Morrison was already changing. The color drained from his face and his eyes began to cloud over. I backed away from the van as the hydraulic fluid finally found its ignition source. The explosion knocked me flat, sending pieces of burning metal across the highway. When I looked up, the transport van was a pillar of fire and black smoke. Morrison was gone. So was Agent Kane. I stood there, radio in my hand, watching my former prison burn. In the distance, I could hear more screaming from the truck stop, more gunshots, more chaos. Time to find out what kind of man I really was when the world fell apart. The sedan sputtered to a stop 3 miles past the truck stop, steam rising from under the crumpled hood. The radiator had finally given up, leaving me stranded on a rural stretch of highway as the October sun began its descent toward the horizon. I tried Morrison's radio, adjusting the frequency to match the emergency channels I'd heard earlier. Static filled the air, broken by fragments of desperate voices. "National Guard units in retreat from Oklahoma City. CDC facility in Atlanta has gone dark. Do not trust anyone showing signs of infection." The battery indicator was already fading. Maybe an hour of power left if I was lucky. I gathered what I could carry. The Glock with its spare magazine, the tactical knife, and the radio. The shackles were still locked around my wrists and ankles, the chain between my feet forcing me to take shortened steps. In the distance, smoke columns rose from what I assumed were Tulsa and Oklahoma City. The world was burning, and I was walking through it dressed like an escaped convict. Because that's exactly what I was. The highway stretched empty in both directions, lined with abandoned vehicles and the occasional wandering figure. I chose the direction that led toward the city outskirts, thinking I might find tools to cut these chains or at least a working vehicle. That's when I heard the engine. A car engine roared to life somewhere behind me, growing louder by the second. I spun around to see a blue pickup truck racing down the highway, swerving around abandoned vehicles. The driver was laying on the horn repeatedly, and I could see multiple figures in the truck bed. As it got closer, I realized they were being chased. A pack of infected had spilled out of a nearby farmhouse, drawn by the noise. The truck was heading straight into them, and the driver seemed to realize the danger at the last second. The truck suddenly veered toward me, tires screaming as it skidded into the gravel shoulder. The passenger door flew open before the vehicle had fully stopped. "Get in," a woman's voice shouted. "Now!" I didn't hesitate. I ran toward the truck as infected figures converged from both sides of the highway, their moans growing louder as they spotted fresh prey. The woman behind the wheel was maybe 40, with graying brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her clothes were stained with blood. In the passenger seat sat a teenage boy, maybe 16, with the same dark eyes and determined expression as the driver. He reminded me of someone, though I couldn't place who in the chaos of the moment. I dove into the truck bed as the woman floored the accelerator. 2 men were already back there, one middle-aged and bearded, the other younger with a military bearing despite his civilian clothes. Both held hunting rifles and were scanning the area for threats. "Where'd you come from?" the bearded man asked, having to shout over the wind and engine noise. "Transport crashed back down the highway," I called back. "Federal custody. Guards are dead." The military-looking guy's eyes immediately focused on my orange jumpsuit and shackles. He didn't say anything, but I could see him filing the information away. "Farm about 10 miles east," the bearded man replied when I asked about their origins. "Lost it this morning when those things overran us. Name's Pete Kowalski. Been working that land for 15 years. The younger man with the rifle was Carson Mitchell, recently discharged Army sergeant. He had the look of someone who'd seen combat, the way he kept scanning the horizon for threats even as we talked. The woman took a hard right onto a state highway, leading toward what looked like the outskirts of Lawton. "I'm Janet Morrison," she called back through the rear window. "That's my son Tyler in front." Morrison, the same name as the van driver who died trying to warn people. Small world, even when it was ending. "Frank," I said, deliberately leaving off my last name. Tyler turned around to look at me, and that's when I realized who he reminded me of. My younger brother Danny, who died in a drive-by shooting 15 years ago. Same dark hair, same stubborn set to his jaw, same way of looking at the world like he was calculating all the angles. Danny had been 17 when he caught that bullet meant for me. A rival crew had been gunning for me after a job went sideways, and Danny just happened to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'd held him as he bled out on the sidewalk outside our apartment, promising him everything would be okay even as the light faded from his eyes. The guilt from that night had driven me deeper into crime, each bank job an attempt to outrun the memory of my brother's blood on my hands. But seeing Tyler brought it all back. The rage, the self-loathing, the knowledge that everyone I cared about ended up dead because of the choices I'd made. "You okay back there?" Carson asked. The way he studied me suggested he was putting pieces together about my situation. "Yeah," I lied, just taking it all in. We drove through the deteriorating suburbs of Lawton. Cars sat abandoned in driveways, their doors hanging open like mouths frozen in silent screams. Front doors hung off their hinges, and bodies lay scattered across lawns where people had tried to flee their own homes. The infected wandered between houses in small groups, drawn by sounds only they could hear. "Jesus," Pete muttered, watching a woman in a blood-stained nightgown stumble across a playground. "Look at this place. It's getting worse the closer we get to the city," Carson observed. "More people means more infected." Tyler had been quiet during the drive, but now he spoke up. "We need shelter before dark. Somewhere defensible with supplies." "There," he pointed ahead. "Gun shop, brick building, barred windows." Coslow's Firearms sat on a corner lot, its reinforced structure looking like a fortress compared to the surrounding storefronts. The windows were covered with security bars, and the building looked like it had been designed to withstand exactly this kind of situation. Pete managed to hotwire a delivery truck parked behind the building, and we used it to ram through the rear entrance. The sound of breaking concrete and twisted metal was deafening, but it got us inside quickly. The shop was a prepper's paradise. Rifles lined the walls in orderly rows, ammunition filled an entire back room in military surplus crates, and emergency supplies were stocked in containers that looked like they could survive a nuclear blast. We quickly barricaded the broken entrance with display cases and furniture. "This should hold us for a while," Carson said, doing a professional assessment of our defenses. "Question is, where do we go from here?" I tried Morrison's radio again, cycling through the emergency frequencies. Most were dead air or static, but finally I picked up a clear signal. "Repeat, this is Colonel Johnson broadcasting from Fort Sill. Establishing safe zone at military coordinates 35.214 north, 98.773 west. All civilian survivors proceed to designated checkpoints for screening and entry. Medical facilities available. Food and shelter provided." The transmission continued with detailed instructions about approaching the base and warnings about infected activity along major routes. "Fort Sills may be 60 miles southwest," Carson noted, his military training helping him calculate distances from the coordinates. "Military base means real protection. Walls, weapons, trained personnel. Also means background checks," I pointed out, unconsciously touching the shackles still locked around my wrists. "Documentation. Questions about how you ended up where you are." Carson's suspicion had been building throughout the evening, and now it finally boiled over. "Speaking of which, you were in federal custody. That jumpsuit isn't county jail issue, and those shackles are Department of Corrections standard. What exactly did you do?" The moment of truth had arrived. I could see Tyler watching me with those eyes that reminded me so much of Danny, and I knew I couldn't lie to him. "Armed robbery," I said simply. 14 banks across 6 states over the course of 12 years. Never killed anyone, if that's what you're asking." Pete whistled low. "Professional criminal. No wonder you handle yourself so well in dangerous situations." Carson's hand moved closer to his sidearm. "Frank what? I want a full name." "Webb, Frank Webb." The name hit Carson like a physical blow. His eyes widened in recognition. "The Phantom Bandit. Jesus Christ, you're actually him." Janet looked between us, confused by Carson's reaction. "What's a Phantom Bandit?" "Bank robber," Carson explained, never taking his eyes off me. "Hit banks across the Southwest for over a decade. FBI's most wanted list for years. They called him the Phantom because he never left prints, never showed his face on cameras, never hurt anyone. Just walked in, took the money, and vanished like smoke." "Never hurt anyone directly," I corrected. "But people got hurt because of what I did. People always get hurt." Tyler had been listening to this exchange with growing interest rather than fear. "Why banks? Why not something else?" The question caught me off guard. Most people wanted to know about the crimes themselves, not the motivation behind them. Money at first. My parents were addicts, heroin, cocaine, whatever they could get. Dead by the time I was 20, leaving me with a mountain of debt and a 17-year-old brother to raise. Danny was smart, had a scholarship to college, but we needed money just to survive. "So you turned to crime," Carson said, his tone making it sound like an inevitable moral failing. "I turned to the fastest way to get large amounts of untraceable cash," I replied. "Banks seemed like the logical choice. Insured money, minimal physical risk if you were smart about it, and the FBI takes longer to respond than local police." "But you kept doing it after you didn't need to," Janet pointed out. "Yeah, I kept doing it because I was good at it, and because each job made the next one necessary. You steal from banks, you make enemies. Rival crews who want your territory. Federal agents who want to make their careers. Dirty cops looking for a payday. So you need money for protection, for bribes, for running when things get hot." Tyler leaned forward, his curiosity genuine. "What happened to your brother?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been expecting it, but that didn't make it any easier to answer. "He died because of me. Drive-by shooting meant for me. I was supposed to be standing where he was, but I'd gone inside to get something from the apartment. Danny took the bullets that were meant for my head." Silence fell over the group. Even Carson's hostility seemed to deflate slightly in the face of that revelation. "How old was he?" Tyler asked quietly. 17, same age as you." Tyler nodded slowly, processing this information with the kind of maturity that reminded me painfully of Danny. "That's why you came back for Morrison, the van driver. You were trying to save someone this time. Smart kid. Too smart for his own good. Fat lot of good it did him, I said. You tried, that's what matters. Carson shook his head. Pretty words, but they don't change the facts. This man is a career criminal, professional thief, the kind of person who makes the world more dangerous for everyone else. The world is already dangerous, Tyler shot back. At least he's dangerous in a way that protects people instead of eating them. Some crimes don't just disappear because the world ends, Carson insisted. And some people don't get to judge others when we're all just trying to survive, Tyler replied, his voice getting heated. Janet looked between her son and Carson with growing concern. Maybe we should all just… No, Mom, Tyler interrupted. This is important. Frank saved our lives today. He fought those things. He kept us safe. He got us here. I don't care what he did before. He's not the same person anymore. You don't know that, Carson argued. Criminals don't just stop being criminals because circumstances change. They adapt. They find new opportunities. I could see where this was heading. The kid was defending me, but it was creating division in the group. In this world, division meant death. Tyler's right about one thing, I said, standing up and gathering my few possessions. My past is my burden to carry, not yours. And Carson's not wrong to be suspicious. I am dangerous and I do make people around me targets. Frank, no, Tyler protested, jumping to his feet. This is the smart play, kid. You'll move faster without me and you won't have to worry about what happens when we reach that military checkpoint and they run background checks. Janet started to object, but I cut her off. I'm not asking for permission. This is how it has to be. Tyler stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the door. You're just running away, like you always do. That stopped me cold. What? You ran after your brother died. Instead of dealing with the guilt, you buried yourself deeper in crime. Now you're running again instead of fighting for something good. The kid's words hit harder than Carson's accusations, because he was right. Maybe, I admitted, but some habits are hard to break. Then break them now, Tyler said fiercely. Stay. Fight for us the way you fought for Danny. I looked at this kid who reminded me so much of my dead brother, and for a moment I almost wavered. But then I saw Carson's expression, saw the doubt in Janet's eyes, saw Pete's studied neutrality. I can't, Tyler, but you remember this. You're worth fighting for. All of you are. Don't let anyone tell you different. I slipped out through the side window before anyone could stop me, leaving behind the closest thing to family I'd found since Danny died. The streets of Lawton were a nightmare. Infected roamed in packs, drawn to any sound or movement. They'd adapted to urban hunting, using buildings for cover and working together in ways that suggested some primitive form of communication. I moved carefully through alleys and abandoned buildings, using skills learned during 15 years of avoiding law enforcement. Stay in shadows, move when others were distracted, always have an escape route planned. The same skills that had kept me ahead of federal agents now kept me ahead of zombies. Hours passed. The sun set, plunging the city into darkness broken only by scattered fires and the occasional emergency light still functioning on backup power. The infected became more active after dark, their moans carrying through empty streets like a chorus of the damned. I found temporary shelter in a pharmacy, its security gate still intact. Inside, I located bolt cutters and finally freed myself from the shackles. The relief immediate as circulation returned to my hands and feet. I also found basic medical supplies and some pain medication for the cuts the shackles had left. But the city was dying around me. Every hour brought new sounds of collapse, breaking glass, distant screams, the growls of infected finding fresh prey. I was alone again, just like after Danny's funeral when I'd walked away from everyone who tried to help and disappeared into a life of crime. That's when I heard the gunfire. It was different from the scattered shots I'd been hearing all night. Organized, disciplined, the kind of sustained fire that suggested trained soldiers. The sound was coming from about 3 blocks north, near what looked like a major intersection. The smart play was to keep walking. Let them handle their own problems. Survive. Instead, I found myself moving toward the fight. What I found was a military convoy pinned down at a four-way intersection, surrounded by infected drawn to the noise of their vehicles and weapons. 2 Humvees and a transport truck, maybe 20 soldiers fighting a losing battle against what looked like hundreds of zombies pouring in from every direction. The infected had them completely surrounded, and the soldiers were burning through ammunition trying to keep from being overrun. Bodies lay scattered around the vehicles, both human and infected, but the zombies kept coming in waves. I climbed to the roof of a nearby building and assessed the situation. The soldiers were professional, disciplined, but they were trapped in a kill zone with no escape route. The infected weren't smart enough to set a deliberate ambush, but the urban terrain had created the same effect. Using the Glock I'd taken from Agent Peterson's car, I began picking off infected from elevated positions, starting with the ones closest to the convoy. The infected turned toward my muzzle flashes, confused by this new threat coming from an unexpected direction. My shots weren't just random harassment. I was creating gaps in their encirclement, giving the soldiers opportunities to consolidate their position and establish fields of fire. It was the kind of tactical thinking Danny would have been proud of if he'd lived to see me put my skills to good use. One of the soldiers, a sergeant, judging by his gear and the way others responded to his orders, noticed the help and began directing his men to take advantage of the openings I was creating. They fought their way toward my building, using suppressing fire to keep the infected at bay. I climbed down to meet them as they secured the ground floor. "Civilian contractor," I told the sergeant, improvising quickly as I approached with my hands visible, but not quite raised. Frank Webb was separated from my unit during the retreat from the northern perimeter. The sergeant studied my appearance, civilian clothes I'd taken from the farmhouse, the tactical knife and service pistol, the confident way I moved and spoke. "You're not military. Specialist consultant, criminal psychology and urban warfare tactics, helping command understand post-collapse security threats and civilian behavior patterns." It was complete nonsense, delivered with the kind of confident authority I'd learned during years of talking my way past bank security. The sergeant needed help more than he needed to verify paperwork. "Can you fight?" "Just prove that." He nodded. "Welcome to the team. I'm Sergeant Williams. We're heading back to Fort Sill with intelligence on infected movement patterns. You stick with us, follow orders, and maybe we all get out of this alive." "Copy that." "Sergeant." The next 3 days were a blur of running battles through abandoned suburbs and rural areas. The infected were everywhere, drawn by the sound of our vehicles, but Williams and his men were good at their jobs. They moved fast, hit hard, and didn't waste ammunition on unnecessary targets. I proved my worth quickly, using my knowledge of criminal tactics to predict where desperate survivors might set up ambushes or roadblocks. Twice I spotted potential threats before they became problems, and once I talked a group of armed civilians out of attacking us by convincing them we were part of a larger relief effort. Williams began relying on my tactical advice, especially when it came to urban movement and dealing with hostile civilians. My criminal background, which had made me a pariah among the Morrison family, actually made me valuable to a military unit operating in a lawless environment. On the 3rd day, as we approached Fort Sill's defensive perimeter, our radio crackled with an emergency transmission. "This is Tyler Morrison, calling any military units in the area. We have 43 civilians, including children and elderly, trapped in Coslow's firearms on Sheridan Road in Lawton. We're running low on ammunition and supplies. Multiple infected groups converging on our position. We need immediate extraction." My blood went cold. They were still in the gun shop, still fighting, still alive, but they were in serious trouble. I looked at Sergeant Williams. "Sir, I know these people. They helped me reach friendly forces when my original unit was overrun. I'd like to volunteer for any rescue mission." Williams studied the tactical map, calculating distances and resources. "It's a long shot, Webb. We'd be going deep into hostile territory with no guarantee we can extract that many people safely." "They saved my life, Sergeant. I owe them." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. All right, but this is a military operation. You follow orders, you watch your team's back, and you bring our people home. Can you handle that? I thought about Danny, about all the people I'd failed to protect over the years, about Morrison dying in that burning van while I stood helpless, about Tyler defending me when everyone else saw only a criminal, about second chances and redemption in a world where both seemed impossible. Yes, sir, I can handle that. An hour later, 2 Black Hawk helicopters lifted off from Fort Sill, carrying a full extraction team back toward Lawton. I sat in the door gunner's position, watching the Oklahoma landscape roll past below, scarred by fire and littered with the remnants of civilization, but still somehow beautiful in the afternoon light. Somewhere down there, Tyler and his family were fighting for their lives, probably wondering if help would ever come. They'd taken in a criminal, fed him, protected him, and defended him even when his past caught up with them. For the first time in my life, I was going to be the cavalry instead of the outlaw. The radio crackled with Tyler's voice again, strained but determined. This is Tyler Morrison. We're holding position, but situation is deteriorating rapidly. If anyone's out there, we could really use that help soon. Hold on, kid, I whispered, checking my weapon one more time. Uncle Frank's coming. The dead could have their world. We were taking it back, one survivor at a time. And this time, I wasn't running away.